Cut your daily coffee, invest the savings instead, and you'll retire a millionaire. It's one of the most repeated pieces of personal finance advice ever given. And the math behind the core claim genuinely isn't wrong. The problem isn't the arithmetic, it's where this advice points your attention and away from what. By the end of this video, you'll see the real math comparing small daily purchases against the much larger decisions most advice barely mentions, and the actual order of priority for where your financial attention carries the most weight. Part 1. Where the latte factor came from. The idea is most closely associated with financial author David Bach, who popularized it in his books in the late 1990s and early 2000s, including The Automatic Millionaire. The core argument, a small daily expense, like a coffee, seems trivial in the moment, but invested consistently over decades at typical long-term market returns, the compounding effect turns that small daily amount into a genuinely large sum by retirement. As pure compound interest arithmetic, this isn't wrong. A few dollars a day invested consistently for 30 or 40 years does compound into a meaningful number. That's just how compounding works on any consistent contribution, regardless of how small. The issue isn't whether the math computes, it's whether this is actually the highest leverage place to direct someone's limited attention and willpower compared to every other financial decision available to them. And that's a completely different question than whether the multiplication is correct. Part 2, the real math problem, scale. Here's the comparison almost no version of the latte factor advice actually makes. How does the dollar magnitude of small daily purchases compare to the dollar magnitude of the big, infrequent decisions most people make about housing, transportation, and debt? A $5 daily coffee habit 5 days a week comes to roughly $1,300 a year. Stretch it to every day of the week, and it's closer to $1,800. Now compare that to a few decisions that get a fraction of the attention in popular financial advice. Choosing an apartment $300 a month cheaper saves $3,600 a year, roughly double the daily coffee habit, from a single decision made once rather than a willpower test repeated every single day for years. Negotiating or refinancing a car loan down by even $100 a month saves $1,200 a year, again from one decision rather than an ongoing daily one. Reducing the interest rate on a credit card balance, the subject covered in this channel's debt payoff video, can easily save more than either of those depending on the balance involved. None of this means the coffee is irrelevant. It means that dollar for dollar, the biggest, most infrequent financial decisions in most people's lives, where covered in Part 4, typically carry 2 to 10 times more leverage than anything available in daily discretionary spending, and they require exactly one decision instead of a willpower contest fought daily for years. Part 3. Why the advice persists anyway. If the math points so clearly toward bigger ticket decisions, why does cut your latte remain one of the most repeated pieces of financial advice in existence? Small purchases are emotionally vivid and frequent. You make the coffee decision daily, you see the receipt, and it's an easy, concrete thing to visualize giving up. A $300 a month difference in rent is abstract by comparison. It's a number on a lease you signed once, not a daily felt choice. Big ticket decisions feel fixed once made. Once you've signed a lease or a car loan, there's a strong psychological pull to treat that decision as settled, not up for reconsideration, a form of status quo bias. Revisiting it feels like undoing a decision, which feels harder than simply not buying tomorrow's coffee. Giving advice about small purchases is socially easier than giving advice about big ones. Telling someone to skip a coffee is a low-stakes, generic suggestion. Telling someone to downsize their apartment, sell their car, or have an uncomfortable conversation about their living situation is much more personal, harder to deliver, and harder to hear, which is exactly why it shows up far less often in popular financial content, even though it usually carries the larger payoff. Part 4. The actual decision hierarchy. Here's a rough hierarchy of where financial leverage actually concentrates for most people, largest to smallest, based purely on typical dollar magnitude. Housing. For most households, this is the single largest line item in the budget, frequently 25 to 40% of take-home income. A relatively modest percentage adjustment here, a slightly smaller place, a different neighborhood, a roommate, a refinanced mortgage at a better rate. Typically dwarfs what's available almost anywhere else in the budget, simply because the underlying number is so much larger to begin with. Transportation, car payments, insurance, and financing terms represent the next major recurring cost for most people, and they're frequently negotiable or replaceable in ways people don't revisit once the initial decision is made. Debt interest rates. As covered in this channel's debt payoff video, the interest rate attached to existing debt, especially high-interest credit card debt, can represent a larger ongoing cost than people realize, and refinancing or consolidating at a lower rate is a one-time decision with an ongoing payoff. Recurring subscriptions and contracts, covered in this channel's subscription video. Individually smaller than housing or transportation, but still typically larger in aggregate than daily discretionary spending, and also a one-time decision rather than a daily one. Daily discretionary spending, the actual latte factor category. Real and worth being aware of, but typically the smallest lever on this entire list in terms of raw dollar magnitude, and the only one that requires repeated daily willpower rather than a single decision. The point of this hierarchy isn't that the bottom category doesn't matter at all. It's that financial attention is a limited resource, and spending most of it on the smallest, most repeatedly difficult lever on the list, while the largest, one-time decision levers go untouched, is close to the opposite of where leverage actually concentrates. Part 5. What this doesn't mean. This isn't an argument that small, recurring purchases are irrelevant, or that the zero-based budgeting and subscription tracking approaches covered elsewhere on this channel don't matter. Small recurring leaks genuinely add up, and awareness of spending in general remains useful. The point is specifically about priority and sequencing. Address the high leverage, one-time decisions first, housing, transportation, debt rates, recurring contracts, because they typically carry far more financial weight per unit of effort than daily discretionary choices. Daily spending awareness is still worth having, it just shouldn't be the first or only place attention goes, and I cut my coffee shouldn't function as a substitute for having the harder conversation about a $300 a month rent difference. The latte factor isn't mathematically wrong. Small amounts really do compound. But as a strategy for where to focus limited financial attention, it points toward the smallest, hardest to sustain lever on the list, while the largest, one-time decisions that typically carry far more leverage get almost no attention by comparison. So here's the one action. Before cutting anything small, look at your 3 biggest recurring costs. Almost certainly housing, transportation, and any high-interest debt. And ask whether any of them has gone unrevisited since the day you first signed up for it. That single conversation usually carries more weight than a year of skipped coffees. If this helped, do me a favor and hit subscribe. That's genuinely what grows this channel, and you'll catch the next breakdown the moment it's up.